Sup, freaks? It's your boy Marty Bent here to introduce this episode of Tales from the Crypt. I had the immense pleasure of sitting back down with Ben Hunt from Epsilon Theory. If you freaks remember last summer, Ben and I sat down with James O'Byrne, had a nice conversation. It was a pretty controversial conversation because Ben is a bit skeptical of the chances that Bitcoin will succeed in the face of strong governments. This episode, we really didn't focus on Bitcoin that much. We talked about it at the end, and I'm happy to report, at least in my mind, he seems a bit more receptive to the idea of Bitcoin and the people behind it, more importantly. This episode, we wanted to focus on something that Ben's been covering quite extensively throughout this year as coronavirus has swept the world, and that is the failing of the institutions that we're supposed to trust across the board, whether it be the World Health Organization, the federal government, hospital administrators, go down the line. There's been immense failure across the board. We really didn't focus on how these institutions failed and when they did, but we more wanted to focus on how individuals could turn away from these institutions and enact grassroots movements to basically fend for themselves and build up their local communities and the global communities that they're also a part of without the need for these institutions. We also talked about an initiative that Ben and his cohorts at Epsilon Theory are running in Frontline Heroes. So we're going to get into that, how Frontline Heroes is helping get is a grassroots movement to help get protective gear to the doctors and nurses who are on the front lines treating people with the coronavirus. This episode of Tales from the Crypt is brought to you by our good friends at the Cash App. You freaks already know all about them. They're helping us do many things. They're helping us stack sats. They're helping us stack slivers of stonks. And they're helping us save money at partner merchants with their Boost program. And on top of that, they've become a bank recently. So you have a banking account number and routing number, and they're trying to help people get their stimulus checks, get their Trump bucks. So they're doing incredible things across the board. They're becoming a new wave bank, in my opinion, that is really doing some cool stuff. Again, they're helping you stack sats. You can hop on the app, stack sats, send sats, receive sats, sell sats if you so please. Sats are the standard on the Cash App. Bitcoin is the only cryptocurrency you can buy on the Cash App. They do not confuse with altcoins. It is Bitcoin only, and you can find safety in sats via the app. On top of that, again, via Cash App investing, you can stack slivers of stonks. If your favorite stonk is a little too expensive, you can buy as little as $1 via Cash App investing. And because Cash App is either connected to your bank account or it is your bank account, there's no 4 to 5 day waiting periods. You can start investing today. Cash App investing is a member SIPC and a subsidiary of Square. As always, make sure you use the code STACKINGSATS when you download the app. That's one word, STACKINGSATS, Stacking Sats. You're going to get $10, and $10 is going to go to our good friends at Owls Lacrosse. That's Owls Lacrosse. Use the code STACKINGSATS. Download the Cash App today, and I hope you enjoyed this quick rip with Ben Hunt. We did 45 minutes, and thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I know Ben may not agree with all Bitcoiners, but I think he's doing some great things in this world, and I think the burn it the fuck down mentality is one that more people need to have. It's time to start walking away from these institutions that are failing us. Enjoy. Okay.
You've had a dynamic where money's become freer than free.
If you talk about a Fed just gone nuts, all the central banks going nuts.
So it's all acting like safe haven.
I believe that in a world where central bankers are tripping over themselves to devalue their currency, Bitcoin wins. In the world of fiat currencies, Bitcoin is the victor.
I mean, that's part of the bull case for Bitcoin.
If you're not paying attention, you probably should be.
What is up, freaks? Welcome back to Tales from the Crypt. It's your boy Marty Bent here on a Friday afternoon during the quarantine life, sitting down with somebody who's been on the podcast before, and it was a very popular episode, very controversial. I don't think we're going to be talking too much about Bitcoin this episode. We may touch on it towards the end, but I'd like to reintroduce you freaks to Ben Hunt. Ben, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here, Marty. Thanks for having me back.
Well, thanks for coming on. I know the response to the last episode. Again, like I said, very controversial, but again, I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. And
I did too, Marty. I did too. And I think you got a hard time for not giving me a harder time, right, about views on Bitcoin and the like. But so happy to revisit some of that if you need to get some punches in. But I really enjoyed that conversation, and it just reaffirmed for me what I appreciate so much about, and I'm not saying this to be patronizing, and I apologize if it comes up that way, the community that you're in, because I think there is an energy and an optimism and a spirit that we need more than ever as we try to reshape our world with the COVID-19 crisis.
Yeah, I'll save the punches for the end, but I think this is
very good.
I mean, the reason I brought you on today is because I think you've been doing a great job of calling out just the blatant and widespread hypocrisy across the board from institutions that people have come to expect that they can trust, whether it be the CDC, the World Health Organization. I mean, I don't think many people trust the Chinese Communist Party up to this point, but it's become blatantly obvious that you shouldn't, down to, I mean, just the way our government here in the United States has reacted on all levels, hospital administrators, how they prepared and have been reacting. It's just, like I said before we hit record, it's very disheartening to see how every single one of these institutions seems to have failed.
It's crazy, right? It is disheartening. I'll give you that, because what we're seeing is not just a litany of errors and mistakes, although certainly that's there too. What we're seeing, in my view, is a litany of betrayals, and I don't use that word lightly, but I mean that all of these institutions that we have charged with protecting the common good, they've betrayed that. Their words, what they say they're going to do, have been, again, in my view, in almost no circumstances, matched by what they've actually done. And it requires, I think, sadly, an event of this magnitude, a real world event of this magnitude, where we have refrigerator trucks in New York City to keep the bodies. It requires an event of this magnitude to give the lie to the stories and to reveal, again, I'll use this word, the betrayals of really almost every institution I can point to.
Yeah, so who should we go after first? That's another reason I brought you on, because you've been telling people to prepare for this pretty early on, before the alarms were being sounded. And that's the crazy thing, is Twitter, as it usually is, or the people on Twitter are the people who are sounding the alarms first. And that's, to me, it's been incredibly fascinating to watch, like the initial underreaction, and now as more data is coming in, we're becoming more aware of who's acutely affected by COVID-19. An argument to be made that maybe now there's an overreaction just as a response to the initial underreaction too.
Yeah, I think the way I'd like to think about it, and this is, I think, played out in some of the notes we've written most recently on Epsilon Theory, I'll approach it from two respects. The first respect is that while I'm in violent agreement that it is so disheartening to see these betrayals of our institutions, the ones who have told us that they are looking out for the common good, I'm similarly overwhelmed with a positive reaction to the generosity of spirit, to the willingness to show empathy and help that we see from just ordinary people, citizens all over the world. And, we wrote a note, it's about a month or so ago, where we said rather optimistically that we thought this would be use a phrase from Winston Churchill when he was talking about World War II, our finest hour. And what I mean by that is not that it's going to be the finest hour from our institutions or our government or our universities or any power structure we can point to. But I do believe that it will be and is our finest hour as citizens, as human beings rising to this challenge to see the world with clear eyes and full hearts. So I think that's one effective way to approach this in a light that shows us a way forward, right? And that allows us to imagine what are the foundations for something better to come out of it. So that's one way to approach it. The other way I think is useful to approach this is that if we think about all the systems that failed us, all the institutions that betrayed us, I think it is important to think of them as a system, right? Not as an isolated incident, not as an isolated incident of, oh, well, this institution, there sure are bad guys. Let's throw those bums out. And where I see this playing out, and I suspect will play out much more prominently in the months to come, is that our reaction to this will be channeled as a referendum on the vote that we're going to have in November, right? That either, oh, Trump did a great job or Trump did a terrible job, and that all this can be fixed depending on whether we vote Trump out or vote Trump back in for another 4 years, right? And my strongest possible view is that, yes, Donald Trump and the White House betrayed us. They are one of the institutions that betrayed us. My personal view is that he's been one of the 3 or 4 worst presidents in the history of the republic, which is, that's pretty rare company. But I think it would be such a tremendous mistake and frankly a tremendous waste of the challenge that's been put in front of us if we think that the solution to the institutional betrayal, to the system of institutional betrayal that we've seen, is something that can be resolved in an election, in a vote. Right? It is much deeper than that, and it requires a commitment that goes so far beyond this kind of faux political participation response of a vote in a certain election. And that's why I'm so happy to come back on your podcast, Marty, because I know that so much of your audience understands exactly what I mean when I say that there is an institutional system here that has been revealed as a betrayer. I think that there is a far more widespread view that there is a system of betrayal here. And, I think this really is the challenge we have to rise to go beyond just, oh, we're going to vote for this clown or that clown in November, but how can we take steps of action that can change that system, to burn it the fuck down, as I like to call it, right? Both from the inside and from beneath. What's the most effective approach to do that? So those are the 2 ways I think that are constructive to talk about this, as opposed to kind of just going through, okay, here's the litany of betrayals and errors that we've experienced, but to instead talk about, all right, the positive outcome of this is that we are seeing a groundswell of popular recognition and then popular action on a grassroots level. And the second, I think, constructive way to talk about this is, what is our strategy for changing the system of the high functioning sociopaths and the political entrepreneurs who dominate these institutions that, again, have betrayed us.
No, I completely agree. would love to take the conversation down those paths. And there's not going to be a referendum during the election.
Right.
The choices we have right now are pretty. I mean, it's just it's crazy how, like how much change people have wanted over the last 2 decades, particularly, or the last 12 years, particularly since Obama first came to office. And we're just getting fed the same terrible choices. And now we have people sitting at home, quarantined. And I think the positive outcomes that you described are coming because people just have more time to think, and it's becoming, like you said, glaringly obvious that these people who are supposed to have control don't have control at all, and people are seeking alternatives. And how are people going to react to this is going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. And I'm hoping I had Chuck Marohn, the author of Strong Towns and the host of a podcast by the same name, on a month ago, right before the market started crashing. And I'm hoping that people sort of turn that way towards a more bottom-up revolution where they're really depending on their neighbors and their local community over these institutions that failed them.
Well, I think that is such an important part of it, and I like the Strong Towns guys a lot. You know, had them into our office to talk about, you know, their mission, and it's one that I support. I do also believe that, you know, it's one of a million different ways that you can find your pack, you know, your community, your organization, and then take action. Right, because it doesn't require that sort of geography, the town layout, although that's absolutely a vital means in some areas for doing that. But you know, this is something that in the densest urban area, right, a megalopolis, you can still find your pack. You can still find ways to do, right, to take action that doesn't require the permission of a government or an institution, that doesn't require you being organized or led from above, but is simply something that you can do right now. And I think you're right that staying at home and really having the time and being forced to have the time to open your eyes and see both the inequity as well as the inefficiency of the top-down measures that are coming at us, and to see, I think, so much more urgently the things that can be done in whatever community you're in from a bottom-up level, that really is a place where I think we can make great strides. One of the ways I think that we can think about this is this decision-making approach called mini-max regret, that I think is a good way to think about, you know, how one makes these decisions about where to spend your where to risk your time and money. And frankly, I think where that ends up, for me at least, is trying to support the people like the doctors, nurses, emergency responders on the front lines of this crisis, you know, who are in fact risking their lives. Because, you know, one thing that this become very clear to me from looking at every community's experience with this, whether it's starting in Wuhan, China, whether it's looking at the early experiences in northern Italy, going over to Spain, whether it's looking at the experiences here in the United States, is that the outcome, the disaster outcome, occurs when your healthcare workers, when they fall to this crisis. And if you apply this decision-making strategy of minimizing your maximum regret, what every maximum regret scenario has in this crisis is for your healthcare system to be overwhelmed, for it to fall. And so what I've been focused on in terms of my grassroots bottom-up effort has not been to, okay, well, how can I support the healthcare system? I can't make ventilators, right? I can't take a crash course in intubation, and get accredited to go, work in an ER somewhere. But what I can do, and I think what we can all do, is try to arm our healthcare workers and emergency responders with that personal protective equipment. The supplies, like the face masks, like the isolation gowns and the like, that really serves as armor for them. So that's the effort that I've been particularly focused on myself. But I think there are so many other efforts that anyone, wherever they are, can participate in, with an eye towards, helping to fight these people, to support the people who are really at the most risk in this war, right? Whether it is the healthcare workers, whether it's the actual working men and women who've been really laid off and really are hurting from the economic shutdown. These are where I think we, from a bottom-up grassroots level, should be spending our attention right now. And then, once we've won this war, then we can go on to, again, burning down these institutions that betrayed us and create something better in their stead.
I completely agree. So what are the logistics of your efforts to get the PPE to the
so it's an interesting question, right? Because part of the sociopathic oligarchy that's led us down this path for the last 40 years. Part and parcel of that has been the offshoring of manufacturing outside of the United States and over to China, so that the actual supplies that we need to arm our healthcare workers, the marginal supply here is all made over in China. And that's fine, except for when you have a situation like you do today, where it becomes almost impossible to maintain the supply chains, and it becomes so difficult to participate in these supply chains without either driving up the price of this equipment even more than it's already being driven up. Because every country is now going to China and saying, we want what you've got, let us buy it. At the same time, then you've also got a lot of, I'll call it, quality control issues, because if I'm a Chinese manufacturer, you've got to imagine, well, of course I'm going to shift my production facility over to making these fake N95 masks, and I'm going to forge this FDA certificate, and I could have sold this for 25 cents 3 months ago, and today I'm going to get $5 for it. So our goal here was first to find a partner who could help us on the ground in China, and similarly to find a way of participating in this market without competing with the federal government and with these state emergency authorities. Because what was also important, and I'm talking about what we're not doing, we don't want to compete with these federal and state agencies, but we also can't wait for these federal and state authorities, right? I mean, as much as we have a trickle-down economy when it comes to money, when it comes to, Congress will bail out Boeing with $50 billion, and the Fed will put a $2 trillion facility in place to bail out asset managers and bond issuers, right? That trickle-down economy is matched only by the trickle-down economy that you see in healthcare, right? Where FEMA will get 1 million masks in, and then they'll put it in a warehouse, and they'll send 100,000 masks to, one hospital system warehouse, and it never trickles down. Just like the money never trickles down to that, that waiter or truck driver who gets laid off in this crisis. In the same way, these masks, this PPE, it never trickles down to the nurses, the doctors, the EMTs who are working a shift in your city or your town. It never trickles down to them. So we weren't going to wait for that, but we also didn't want to try to compete for these million mask orders. So what we constructed, I'll call it we like to refer to it as like an underground railroad of PPE, where we worked with the employees of a Fortune 50 company. Actually, it was Intel. I'll give them a little plug here. This is not an Intel corporate initiative, right? Frankly, we were looking at this, and Intel corporate people took one look at the Epsilon Theory website, and they said, "Well, no, we can't partner with you." It was a little. It wasn't, let's say, corporate friendly at that level.
Do you want to burn us down?
Exactly, right? So, but this was all done on the personal time and personal pocketbook of Intel employees, not just here in the United States, but Chinese citizens who work for Intel in mainland China, right? They were the ones who were actually going out, and again, on their own time and their own money. We've reimbursed them, of course, but they would go out and buy this equipment personally, package it together, mail it over here to us. We would then repackage it. We put out the word to try to get doctors, nurses, emergency responders, let us know if you are in urgent need of PPE. We can't get you 10,000 masks, right? But we can absolutely get you 100 masks. We can get you 200 masks, right? Which then you can hand out to your team and bypass this trickle-down economy that we have set up, not just in money, but also in the equipment that's necessary to keep these healthcare workers alive. So it's this grassroots, bottom-up effort. It's just individuals. It's like pure capitalism, right? It's just purely individuals coming together and organizing to do this. So it's, again, I can't tell you how gratifying it is to see both the willingness of people all over the world to step up and participate, but also to donate money, to put out the word on this. So, we've been doing this for 3 weeks or so now, and we've raised over $800,000. We've distributed, as of today, over 30,000 N95 masks, all in packets of 50, 100, 200, directly into the hands of doctors and nurses and emergency responders. We'll send it to their house, because you get a lot of cases where, if you send it to the hospital, the hospital may say, "Oh, well, what's that doing here?" So it's crazy what you have to do to get around the system, but it's also equally crazy and even more so gratifying to see how people will step up and really participate like this to get the job done.
I completely agree, and I think you'll be happy to hear that something like this, very similar to the process you just described, happened within the Bitcoin community too in New York. Actually, my co-host Matt Odell helped organize it. There was a Bitcoiner in China who had access to a few thousand masks, and coordinated with Bitcoiners in the States, in New York particularly, to get masks over here. And it was funny. It was funny the hurdles that had to be talked through. I wasn't as integral in the process as Matt Odell was, and some other New York Bitcoiners, due to the fact that I was down here in South Jersey. But things to take into consideration, like you can't have an order over 10,000 because the FDA would have stopped it at the border and tried to confiscate it and make sure that the masks were up to snuff. But it is funny that that's what it took. And so people bought masks individually and then wound up donating them or getting them straight to nurses and doctors as well. So it's incredible to see that this is happening, not just what you guys are doing, but outside of it as well. Yeah.
Well, so that doesn't surprise me at all, that effort that you guys made. It's it's another reason why I wanted to come on your show again. Let me kind of give the quick blurb for the website and the like we've got for our effort, because this is an ongoing effort. We get out about between 2,000 and 3,000 masks a day all over the country to people who need it. So the website is Frontline Heroes USA. It's all one word, frontlineheroesusa.org. And if you want to donate money, we can do that there. But as important, if you are a healthcare worker, an emergency responder, or you know someone who is, we've got the form online there. Let us know who you are. Like I say, we can't get a bulk order to a hospital system. We can absolutely get 100, 200 masks to a team, to a doctor, to a nurse, to an EMT, to a fire department, right, who needs that stuff right now. So frontlineheroesusa.org.
Go check it out, freaks. So these grassroots efforts are popping up now, and so eventually, hopefully, this virus blows over, and the dust settles, and we're looking around at the emperors wearing no clothes. What do you think happens? Like, do you think revolution is in the air right now? I mean, do you think like an Occupy Wall Street type of anger comes back to that extent, or hopefully larger?
Yeah, this is going to kind of get to, I think, kind of our original Bitcoin conversation, Marty, because I don't think that a protest, I don't think marching for something, I don't think voting for someone, I don't think that changes the system. It doesn't change the hearts and minds of participants. I'll describe kind of what I'm trying to do with Epsilon Theory. It's different from what I know you're trying to achieve with Bitcoin. I know that we're allies in this. But it's a different path. So what I want to do, and this is why we named our company Second Foundation Partners, is that I really do think that there is an opportunity to use what we call the narrative machine to both measure and identify the narratives that we are inundated with. Many of them are anti-Bitcoin narratives, right? It's the narrative of Wall Street. It's the narrative of the White House, whoever's in the White House, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, right? It's the narrative of these institutions who, again, I think have revealed themselves as having betrayed us and our interest during this crisis. I think there's an opportunity not only to identify and measure these narratives, but also increasingly to create our own narratives that both jam, if you're talking about kind of signals, to jam the signal of these narratives that are being distributed today, but also to put out our own narrative, which is not an answer. And it won't be, the answer is Bitcoin, or the answer is, vote for whoever, or vote, or, march for this. I really think that the narrative that we can establish is one of reciprocity and empathy. It is a narrative of rejecting the I'll call it the maximization decision-making mythology that is put at us constantly, and replacing it with this narrative of resilience, of grassroots, bottom-up efforts to promote local, and I really do mean local reciprocity and empathy and cooperation. I do believe that is the right strategy for, again, I'm going to say, sort of burning these institutions, not from above, not in some protest of pitchforks and torches, but burning them out from within by, over time, replacing the people who participate in these institutions with people who ascribe to the values that I know you ascribe to and that I do as well, but also burning them down from below by really creating entirely alternative economies that don't necessarily operate at scale, except I'll say kind of epistemically, in terms of having a community that you know exists and you can communicate with. But I really do think that that's kind of the bottom-up approach of really ignoring and separating from these institutions rather than trying to march on them or to replace, one sociopathic leader with another sociopath.
Burn it all down by walking away.
There's a huge part of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, so there was an instance in California, an example of this localism starting that really gave me encouragement too, talking about PPE. When they shut down the local gyms in this county, the guy who ran the local gym actually started making just bar sets for individuals that he would then deliver to their houses so they could work out at home. And that one little action started inciting sort of a feedback loop of a new supply chain where the linen producer in the town saw him doing that and decided to repurpose his factory to make PPE for people who wanted to get masks and couldn't do so. So the linen factory turned into a mask factory. Yep. And then from there, you just had the local economy sort of supporting itself and buying goods from each other and supporting each other and keeping economic activity going on as much as possible during these tough times.
That is a great example of what I mean by our finest hour. I mean, it really is these communities coming together, and I'm certain that it happens at scale, right? The reason I wanted to happen from this bottom-up effort, Marty, is that for a long time I did think, right, that it was possible to have a defining moment, a defining top-down moment of, call it rebellion, call it, the emperor has you, whatever you want to call it. And I got to tell you, it was really Jeffrey Epstein and, when that disabused me of that notion. And it's I don't know whether he was killed or whether he committed suicide. And I say that I don't know because I don't care. I really don't care. The fact that he did die in custody at the jail, the note I wrote on this was like from the Godfather when, Vito Corleone, says to the five families, he's trying to get Michael, his son, back from Italy. He says, look, I'm a superstitious man and, I'll forgive anything, but, if Michael, God forbid, he gets arrested and, he hangs himself in his jail cell, right? I'm going to blame some of the people in this room because it doesn't matter if it's an accident, right? Or if it was intentional. It really doesn't matter. Right? That can't happen in a non-corrupt state. It just can't, right? And yet it did. So I'm blaming the people in that room of the corrupt state, the room of violence and power against children, with impunity. And what Epstein, that event hit me like a ton of bricks was, the system, and again, I'm talking about the system, not an election, not a trial, not the collapse of this particular company like AIG in 2008. The system is never going to collapse or be changed on a single point of failure. It's never going to happen on a single point of failure. It requires points of failure at scale. Points of failure at scale. And my personal view, right, is that the medium of money is the wrong place to achieve those points of failure at scale, right? Which is our old debate here. But I do think that we're on the same page here, that we're both looking for places to create points of failure with the current system at scale. And that if you can achieve that, then I do think we can make real change in the world.
I agree. And I will pushback that I do think money is important tool to go after, because and I think Bitcoin gives power back to the common man. So that's a trope I've been, not a trope, a saying I've been falling back on and repeating throughout this crisis, is the common man's just be getting the short end of the stick. Your blue collar worker who just wants to live his life, work, do hard work, provide for his family, come home and enjoy the fruits of his labor. And I think the monetary system, I'm pretty certain of it, though, doesn't allow him to do that. He's got to chase for yield. He's got to go out and he's not allowed to say, he can try to save money, but due to the inflationary policies that exist in our current monetary policy, he's not able to. His purchasing power is destroyed over the course of his lifetime. It's forcing both parents into the workforce and then destroying the family life to some regard. The divorce rate's at all-time highs. Money stress is very big stress, one of the biggest stress inducers in the world. So giving the common man the ability to take back his ability to save, accumulate capital over time, and then do that in a currency that's completely disconnected from the traditional financial system, and do that on his own, take possession of it on his own, and not have the ability to have that can be confiscated. It's just very hard to do so. I think that's powerful. And I don't think it's a panacea. Like you said, you got to find these points within the system that can be attacked. And I do think money is a very important one to attack. And I think Bitcoin is succeeding and doing that. And I think a lot of people are beginning to question, particularly after the bailouts. I mean, you tweeted out the bailout, set aside a clause. The Fed set aside a clause that assured that the executives are going to be able to get their bonuses this year.
Yeah, and bank executives, right? It's just, it's unbelievable, right? It's happening in plain sight. It really is I think we are arguing from the same side of the table. I think it's an argument about tactics rather than strategy. And like I say, I see us as allies in this for sure. And so it's not, I think, worth going too far down the allies arguing about this tactic versus that tactic, because it's a big world, and the ability to fight this war on multiple fronts, I think, is only a positive thing here.
No, I agree, and I do think the increased anger and the increased knowledge, more importantly, if 2008 wasn't obvious that people were getting screwed, now it's blatantly obvious. People are sitting at home, they get $1,200 worth of Trump bucks, while the Boeings and the bank executives and the hedge funds get trillions of dollars and are basically rewarded for their undue risk that was in the first place incentivized by the federal banking system.
Marty, I think what's going to be really interesting, and kind of you're asking the question about what comes next, right? What we've seen over the past 11 years now, and certainly it's accelerated over the last 3 years, is this disjuncture, this gulf between what I'll call, real world and market world, right? The real economy and the market economy, to the point where, the stock market, we're off, after today, we'll be off 11% from our all-time high, something like that. Nothing, essentially nothing. And we look at high yield debt and other debt instruments, it's less than 10% off. I saw where a lot of the big private equity funds have given their investors their marks on their portfolio as of March 31st in Q1. And I saw, for example, a Goldman Sachs private equity book. They wrote it down by 3%, 2.9%. Right? I mean, the question is going to be, can you maintain this gulf between what's happening in the real world and the pain that's occurring in the real economy with the support and the lack of pain in the market economy? Uh, that to me is going to be the story of the next 6 months. And I'll give you two ways this can go. One way this can go is a continuation of what we've seen today, right? Which is that I'll call it the conflict between market world and real world is sublimated, is focused on the election in November, right? Where everyone says, "Oh, we can fix it if we vote Trump out," right? Or, "Oh, we can keep the good times rolling if we vote Trump in." That's one way it can go, and that would be just such a enormous tragedy, I think, right? If that's the way it goes. But I think there's a real possibility that is the way it goes. There's another path this could go, though, and I want to take you back to 2008, because in mid-March of 2008, Bear Stearns its stock price went from $95, I think, at its peak, kind of in February, to a price of $2 when it was, the Fed kind of took it out in the middle of the street and shot it in the head. And then they gave the carcass to J.P. Morgan for $5 a share. That happened at the end of March, and the market came roaring back in April and May, just like we're seeing today, to the point where by kind of mid-May, the market was almost all the way back to its peak from at its all-time high. And the argument was, oh, systemic risk is off the table. That was the line you heard repeated over and over again after Bear Stearns was eliminated, right?
Subprime is contained.
Yes, subprime is contained. Systemic risk is off the table. It was just this one bad actor of Bear Stearns, and we took care of that, so all is well. But then, of course, the rot, the sheer iniquity of this enormous asset class called residential mortgage-backed securities, of course, that risk was not limited just to Bear Stearns. It permeated the financial system. And as that became clear in the summer of 2008, market world reacted with the great fall and crisis that we remember of the great financial crisis. So I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see over the next 6 months, because I think that similar thing, that Bear Stearns moment of 2008, is in a sense happening again today, right? Where the market is coming back. They're saying, oh, we're going to have this treatment or that treatment. We've got the Fed's going to support us. It's all going to be fine. It's contained, right? And we'll see. We'll see, because my view is that the damage that's been done to the real economy, into the real world with real people, is so much more pronounced and ubiquitous than market world believes it is. And I think that's really going to tell the tale, whether we're seeing a repeat of 2008 or whether we're going to see more of what we've seen over the last 11 years, where this crisis is just pushed down onto who are you voting for president, and the system remains the same. That's what I think we have to be watching for.
I agree. I'm very skeptical that we will see a V-shaped recovery. I mean, it's just, you can't shut down the economy and expect it to bounce back right away. This is, again, a complex system that is basically an organism, and you just don't turn a switch and turn it back on. I think that'll become glaringly obvious in the next few months. And I think the screen grab of Kramer on CNBC the day unemployment number hit 16 million Americans, and in the background, I think the ticker line was 6.5 million Americans file for unemployment, and in the background you have the Dow second best day in history, like in the background. It's I think that will be an image that it goes down in history as a juxtaposition that really described the disconnection of the day.
Right on, brother. Right on.
Well, I know you only have 45 minutes. It flew by. It's always a pleasure sitting down and chatting with you. Keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you, Marty. You too. You too.
And
FrontlineHeroesUSA.org for us, and I'll keep looking to listen to Tales from the Crypt. This is great.
Yeah, you should spin up a Bitcoin wallet. I'll send you some Bitcoin.
Let's do this.
Yeah. All right. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thanks,
That's all we
Marty.
got today. Peace and love, freaks. Tiki.